Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start with Turkey, which says 33 of its soldiers were killed by a Syrian airstrike in northwestern Idlib province. The governor of Hatay province, Rahmi Dogan, says 32 others were wounded in the attack. The losses mark the highest number of fatalities suffered by Turkey in a single day since tensions escalated between Damascus and Ankara last month. This report has details.
Tensions in Syria have been high since Turkish and Syrian forces came to blows in Idlib province, leading to hundreds of casualties. In the small hours of Friday, Turkey suffered the biggest blow yet to its campaign to secure its safe zone. As a result of the airstrikes, 33 soldiers are martyred. None of our wounded soldiers who are being treated in hospital are in critical condition. May our martyrs rest in peace. Our speedy recovery for our wounded soldiers. In retaliation, Turkey bombed every known Syrian military target after a 6-hour-long emergency meeting chaired by President Tayyip Erdogan. Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu spoke to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg over the assault. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has repeated his call for an immediate ceasefire in the region. Idlib is the last opposition-held stronghold in the country and home to 4 million civilians.
Israel has approved the construction of nearly 1,800 illegal settler homes in the occupied West Bank. In a statement, Israel's Defense Minister Naftali Bennett said Tel Aviv will not give an inch of land to the Arabs. Anti-settlement NGO Peace Now says a total of 1,739 homes have been earmarked, most of which are deep inside the West Bank. It said 1,036 have been given first stage approval, while 703 have received final stage approval. The approval of these units comes 4 days ahead of a general election in Israel. The announcement also marks the latest in a recent string of promises by Israeli officials to expand the settlements, which are illegal under international law. In Iraq, lawmakers have failed to agree on a new government, plunging the country deeper into political uncertainty. The parliament adjourned a session to approve a cabinet proposed by Prime Minister-designate Mohammad Alawi due to a lack of quorum. Government officials say Alawi's cabinet selection was heavily influenced by cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. A political crisis has gripped the country since October last year, killing over 500 people in mass protests against corruption and unemployment. 22 Republican lawmakers have expressed serious concern about the anticipated U.S.-Taliban peace deal. In a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Congress members said the deal will jeopardize American national security interests. The Congress members, led by Liz Cheney, thought assurances that the Trump administration will not place American security at Taliban's hands. The lawmakers said U.S. troops withdrawal from Afghanistan will enable terrorist groups to grow stronger and establish safe havens. The letter said any promises made by the Taliban related to counterterrorism cannot be trusted. The Congress members asked Pompeo to ensure no intelligence is shared with the fighters. The U.S. and Taliban are expected to ink the years-long negotiated peace deal tomorrow. For the awaited U.S.-Taliban peace deal, we have with us Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Thank you for your time. Now, Mr. Qureshi, with the historic first step towards peace in the war-torn country now just hours away, how significant has Pakistan's role been in helping the warring sides arrive at this point?
Well, it wouldn't have happened without Pakistan's support and facilitation. And this is being recognized by everyone here. I'm in Doha. People are arriving. Delegates are arriving. Approximately 50 countries will be represented. And there'll be a number of foreign ministers participating in the ceremony, signing ceremony tomorrow. Pakistan is being discussed, and I'm glad to share with you, is being discussed positively by the international community. The international press is here. People from all over the world have converged in Doha, and they find this to be a significantly important event that is about to happen, and Pakistan's role is central to it.
People and stakeholders are arriving Doha. During this 7-day token ceasefire deal, there have been incidents of violence which the Taliban have distanced themselves from. How much do the US and the Taliban trust each other to not let such incidents sabotage the progress of the peace process?
You have to acknowledge the fact that there were elements, and there are elements, who do not want this agreement to go ahead. And they have tried to play the role of spoilers. Pakistan has been pointing it out throughout that there are spoilers. There are spoilers within Afghanistan, and there are spoilers in the region who do not want to see this agreement move ahead. But the good thing is that the important players of the region, important countries like Russia, like China, like the European Union, the United States, and other important players have endorsed this and are supporting this peace process. So we have to be vigilant of the spoilers. There are elements over there who would not want this to happen, but the overwhelming majority, I think, feels that this is a right step at the right time.
Mr. Qureshi, you rightfully said that Pakistan's role as a facilitator is being positively discussed in Afghan peace process for an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution. Does Pakistan's role end with the signing of the peace deal tomorrow?
You see, this now the responsibility has to shift towards Afghans. Hopefully, once the agreement is signed, there will be an environment created for an intra-Afghan dialogue. Now, that dialogue is amongst Afghans. Pakistan has no role in it. They have to sit and decide what kind of Afghanistan do they want, what kind of a political dispensation is good for them, they are comfortable with, how inclusive do they want to be, how do they sit together and chart out a way forward for peace and stability in Afghanistan. It's primarily their role. Pakistan will be supportive, because Pakistan supports the peace process. Pakistan is supportive of reconciliation. Pakistan has been consistently supporting and advocating an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process.
Now, Mr. Qureshi, as we have the opportunity to talk to you about regional stability, let's talk about India. With 38 Muslims killed in recent riots and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government overseeing a mass targeting of Muslims, India intends to render hundreds of thousands of Muslims stateless and has been very vocal in telling them to shift to Pakistan. If it comes to that, is Pakistan ready for any such mass migration?
Well, to begin with, what the world is seeing is horrific. The world is seeing how a secular democracy, the so-called secular democracy, has been overtaken by a Hindutva mindset. And not just the world, there are many within India who are scared of this transition taking place, and they are agitating, they are protesting. The opposition is, and many factions and minorities besides Muslims. Muslims are complaining. They are complaining because of the discriminatory nature of the Citizen Amendment Act. But do you think the Christians are secure? Do you think the Dalits, who are a lower caste, Hindu caste, are they happy? Do you think the Sikhs are comfortable? Not at all. Jains, Buddhists, others? No. There is a huge voice today in India which is very unhappy with the policies that are being pursued by the present regime in Delhi. People are complaining. Major opposition leaders are even being critical of the role the Supreme Court is playing. For example, a judge who takes cognizance of police officers who were sort of overlooking what was going on in Delhi, in fact were facilitating and supporting people who were committing arson and torture over there. And that very judge has been transferred from Delhi to Haryana. Now, what kind of a justice is that going to be? Where will people go for justice? Now, who am I to say that? Indian leadership, prominent names in India are tweeting about it, are complaining about it. So that is the shift that has taken place, and the world has taken notice. Writers, singers, actors, Foreign Relations Committee members of the U.S. Congress are complaining about it. Members of Parliament in the House of Commons, the European parliamentarians, members of the European Parliament have been talking about it. Human Rights Council in Geneva is discussing these issues, human rights violations.
We were in conversation with Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi talking about regional stability. Thank you for your time. Now, moving more on this bulletin. In India, the death toll in riots during anti-citizenship law protest in the capital, New Delhi, has risen to 38. Hindu radicals targeted 4 mosques, 79 Muslim houses, 52 shops, 2 schools, and 3 factories owned by Muslims. Fire service officials say over 500 cars, trucks, and buses were destroyed by the radicals. The US, France, and Russia have issued security alert for their citizens in India due to growing incidents of mob violence by Hindu extremists. In their separate statements, the US and Russian embassies in Delhi cautioned their citizens against traveling in the country. Washington has also called on all sides to refrain from violence and to maintain peace in the country. Protests broke out in Delhi after the ruling BJP government enacted the Citizenship Amendment Act, rendering millions of Muslims potentially stateless. The US has urged India to respect the right to peaceful assembly. The top US diplomat for South Asia, Alice Wells, called on all sides to refrain from violence. The Democratic frontrunner Bernie Sanders has denounced President Donald Trump's response to the anti-Muslim mob violence in India. The US Commission on International Religious Freedom has also criticized the Indian response, voicing alarm at reports of police inaction. India has seen mass protest after Modi's Hindu nationalist government pushed forward a controversial citizenship law. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. In China, another 44 people have lost their lives to the new coronavirus in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of deaths to 2,788. In the meantime, South Korea has reported 256 new cases, raising the total infections to 2,022. More in this report.
The coronavirus scare has gripped the world as new confirmed cases of the disease reported in regions outside China continue to rise. The World Health Organization says it is alarmed at the new figures and has urged countries to prepare themselves against the spread of the disease.
The increase in the rest of the world, we will see more cases, is a bad news. And especially in 3 countries, we're seeing clusters in Iran, in Italy, and also in Korea.
Afghanistan and Pakistan face a potential health crisis after the new coronavirus erupted in neighboring Iran. Pakistan closed its border with Iran after 2 individuals returning from the country were found to be infected. But people continue to cross between Afghanistan and Iran after the border was reopened following a temporary closure.
We have come from Tehran. As soon as we heard that the borders have been opened, we were happy. Doctors are checking travelers on the Iran and Afghanistan borders, and if the borders were not opened, we would be in trouble.
The fatal virus has now spread to 45 countries, infecting over 82,000 people. The outbreak in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia have fanned fears of poor countries without the healthcare infrastructure to cope with the challenges.
Iran says its death toll from coronavirus has risen to 26, with 245 cases, including several senior officials. The Vice President for Women and Family Affairs, Masoumeh Eftekar, and Deputy Health Minister Iraj Harirchi have also been infected. Officials say Eftekar's case is mild and she has not been hospitalized. A lawmaker, Mahmoud Sadeghi, has also tested positive for coronavirus. The outbreak prompted authorities to call off Friday prayers in several cities, including Tehran. State media said Tehran has banned Chinese nationals from entering the country. The death rate among confirmed cases of the virus has been higher in Iran than elsewhere. The coronavirus is spreading more quickly in Europe and other parts of the world than in China. The disease was detected for the first time in Estonia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Greece. Greece has reported 2 new cases in the past 24 hours, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to 3. In Switzerland, the number of confirmed coronavirus cases has risen to 4. Meanwhile, France has cancelled a big finale of a carnival in Nice that borders northern Italy over coronavirus fears. The carnival in the southern city started on 15th February and was set for the finale on Saturday. France is on high alert and has so far confirmed 2 deaths and 18 infections due to the virus in the country. Dominicans have staged fresh protests in Santo Domingo after municipal elections were suspended earlier this month. The Republic's Electoral Institute suspended a nationwide election 4 hours after voting began on February 16th. The government says failure of half of the automated voting machines forced the suspension. An Organization of American States investigation backed the government's claim, saying the voting machines were not manipulated. Protesters are now calling for officials at the Electoral Institute to resign and for an investigation.
We want to know what happened with the suspension of municipal elections. We want answers. Young people are 40% of the voters this year, and we deserve justice, as we have demanded in recent days.
The US says it will never recognize Russian claims of sovereignty over Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. In a statement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said February 27th marked the 6th anniversary of Russia's annexation of Crimean Peninsula. He said the Russian occupation authorities continue to violate human rights and fundamental freedoms. Pompeo said the increasing militarization of the peninsula is a threat to common security. Moscow and Kiev have been at loggerheads since Russia annexed Crimea after a controversial referendum. The African Union has announced a temporary deployment of 3,000 troops in West Africa's Sahel region in response to a growing insurgency. AU's Peace and Security Commission Chief Ismail Cherghoui says the decision was taken at the organization's annual summit last month in Addis Ababa. Cherghoui said the decision was prompted by the rise in the level of threat and its complexity. Last week, the UN said over 4,000 people in Burkina Faso have been forced out of their homes by a rising number of attacks on civilians. The bloodshed has escalated despite the presence of 13,000-strong UN peacekeeping force in Mali. The UN says 4,000 people have died in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in 2019, 5 times more than the levels of 2016.
To work on deploying a force of 3,000 troops to help the Sahel countries degrade terrorist groups. I think this is a decision that we will be working on together with the G5 Sahel and the ECOWAS.
Syrian girl whose father taught her to laugh at the sound of bombs has traveled to Turkey with her family. 3-year-old Salva blew kisses to cameras as she arrived in Turkey to start a new life. This report will now tell you more.
A week ago, a video of a 3-year-old girl's infectious laugh captured hearts around the world. Salwa's father, Abdullah Muhammad, came up with a game to help his daughter cope with the sounds of war. He encouraged her to simply laugh whenever bombs or shells landed in the vicinity.
When I know that there will be a strike, I immediately take out my phone and tell her to come. Let's take photos and so on. I turn the matter into a game so that she won't be afraid. Because if she was alone and saw that her mother is afraid and her father is afraid, then she will definitely be afraid.
Muhammad noted that many children suffer psychological hardships and stress due to daily airstrikes. He wanted to avoid Salwa suffering the same scars of war. He said that he managed to convince his daughter that these noises are similar to the sounds of fireworks. Salwa and her family have since been invited to live in Turkey. Muhammad has thanked the Turkish government for its support.
The World Bank has restored relations with Somalia after a 30-year break, paving way for the country to have access to low-cost development aid. Contact was severed in 1991 as the country descended into conflict, facing violence from militant groups. World Bank Vice President for Africa, Hafez Ghanem, said Somalia has made important reforms to drive the economy forward. Somalia has won initial approval from World Bank and IMF to get hundreds of millions in debt relief. Somalia's Finance Minister Abdulrahman Bailey said the approval is a recognition of the government's efforts to improve country's economic situation. Almost 70% of Somalis live on less than $2 a day. Global markets have plummeted with investors running for the hills over the spread of the new coronavirus. Equities from the United States to Asia are on course to record their worst week since the global financial crisis more than a decade ago. US Dow Jones index crashed almost 1,200 points, while Nikkei 225 has nosedived over 4%. Shanghai Composite and Seoul's Kospi are trading over 3% lower as the virus stokes global recession fears. Hong Kong's Hang Seng index has lost nearly 3%. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil prices have plunged nearly 3%, while WTI crude has lost over 3%, recording a 12-month low. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.